The subject of what I'm going to talk about today is the influence of intelligence on politics. That's the general term. I'm going to speak more specific about the influence of Mossad on your governments. And what does that entail? Now, before I go any further, let me explain to you where I come from. In my opinions, I believe in the right of the State of Israel to be a state. I believe in the freedoms of the Israeli citizens to have those freedoms and their right to have those freedoms. I believe in the fact that there should be, as Balfour has declared, a home for the Jewish people in the land of Palestine, which has a second part to it without impeding the rights of the indigenous population there. Now that's maybe where I differ from a lot of other people, in the fact that I do believe that people have rights wherever they are. The intelligence agency that I belong to, the Mossad, believes in its right as an organization to exist. And it will do everything in its power to maintain power. Now, intelligence agencies have a tendency to want to show things a little worse than they are, because that way they can advance and grow. I mean, if there's peace, who needs them? And that works everywhere. I mean, it works in the Soviet Union, or now Russia. It works in the United States. It works in, well, it doesn't work in Canada because we don't have an intelligence agency. No, we don't. Canada does not have an intelligence agency. It has an internal intelligence agency, which is called CSIS, which is the equivalent of the FBI, which nobody can call an intelligence agency. No, they're intelligent, and they're an agency. Now, let's get right to the point. What does the Mossad do to the United States? How does it look at the United States, and why it's not working in the best interest of the State of Israel? Now, when I speak to you about that, I speak to you as somebody who cares about the State of Israel, not somebody who wants to see any harm come to that country. And I think that the Mossad is causing harm both to Israel and to the Jewish community in North America. And the way it goes is this. The Mossad regards the U.S. as its own playing ground, as a tool to an end, saying, you guys make nice arms that we can use. You guys have things that we want, therefore we want to take it. Now, you can't blame the Mossad for everything. I mean, you have to blame your own government. I mean, as far as your government is concerned, what you are is like one of those cash machines to the world. You know, there's the U.S., and there's politicians who hand out these ATM cards to all these countries around the world, and they say, hey, help yourself, no limit. Big sale, they're selling out whatever they want. So you can't really blame countries for coming in and taking. I mean, you're saying, here it is, take it, these countries need it. What do you expect? The Mossad needs to influence the United States because the United States is the only major power in the world today. And when it wasn't, it played it against the other major power at the time, which was the Soviet Union. At that time, during the Cold War, it was always said, we are the only Western country in the Middle East, therefore you have to support us because we are your front line in the Middle East. Now, and during a period of time, there was a truth to that. Then the government in Israel changed and became what is called the Likud, or the extreme right-wing government of Israel. I should go a little bit further back. In the creation of the State of Israel, Zionism stands for really not a religious state. It looks at Israel as Zionism is a secular movement. It's a movement to bring the Jewish people and give them a home in the land of Israel. It is not a messianic movement. Because if we go to Messianic movements and we go back to the Bible and we go back to those people who are extremely religious in Israel, they'll tell you that they're anti-Zionist because they say we as Jews cannot go back to Israel unless we fulfill what's said in the Bible, which means wait until the Messiah comes and brings you back. So if we go back as a religious group, we have no rights to the land. So there's a contradiction right there that a lot of people can't live with. And they have a problem with that. During the creation of the state, there were two movements. There was one which was the labor movement, the Haganah, which looked at the Zionism from one angle. And there was another movement, which was the Etzel and the Lehi, which was two other kinds of organizations which were further to the right. Now, these organizations had in their theme, the way they said it was they based it on a person by the name of Jabotinsky, who said, with blood and fear we will build us a nation of cruel and honest and fearless. I heard that somewhere else before, but that was their statement. That's what they looked upon as the state of Israel, that it should be, a very powerful militant state. They had no support amongst the Jewish community in North America. The Jewish community was mainly towards the Haganah, the more liberal, the more open, the more Western style of government. Then the Likud came to power. Until that point, in Israel, the idea was this. The North American Jewish community is there to help us financially, but stay out of our business. We don't want you to tell us what to do. We're a free country. We're not going to ask you. You want to have a say? Come over here and settle. But don't send us your orders from the U.S. Then came the Likud and said, wait a minute, we need more money. And they went to the U.S. and they started moving the community further to the right. Now, the Mossad was very influential in that because the Mossad needs sources of information. And the Mossad needs a base. Now, if you look at the KGB, for example, or the CIA for that matter, you'll find out that they have hundreds of thousands of people working for them as an infrastructure. They can't operate. An intelligence agency cannot operate without an infrastructure. Just to give you an example, let's assume you have a station in London. In order to have a station in London, what do you need? You need doctors, you need drivers, you need cars, you need apartments, you need people who buy food, who sell food, you need people who get you tickets, you need a lot of people around the actual operatives. The guy who goes out and recruits somebody needs a lot of backing. He can't do it on his own. The Mossad is very small. We're talking about an organization that has about 1,200 people, including secretaries and drivers. Now, how do you spread that across the entire world that you have to gather information from? Because you see, a Mossad cannot have a station in Damascus because it has no embassy there. So you cannot have an open station. So what you do is this. You open a station in London with 5 guys. 5, sorry. That's the Mossad sign for 5. These 5 guys are the actual case officers. Then what you do is you get people to come from Israel, and they scout the country, and they come up with a lot of names of the Jewish community in London. And these guys then go out and they'll approach a doctor, a Jewish doctor in London, and they say to him, listen, we need your help in order to save Jews elsewhere. And we might be turning to you. Will you be helpful to us? 70% turn them down, but nobody will ever turn them in. And that's a very important factor. So you can go to another guy, and another guy, and another guy. Before you know it, you've got 300, 400 people in London who are supporting the station. You need a car, you pick up the phone, you say, Mr. So-and-so, I need a car. I don't need it registered. An hour later, you can pick up the car. I need a safe house. 2 hours later, you have a safe house. I need a doctor. I need tickets. I need transportation. I need $300,000 in an hour at 12 o'clock at night. So you get a banker who opens the bank and he takes it out because he knows 2 days from now the money is going to be back. We're good for it. So now you have a station that has 300 people, and then you want a new cadre, new people. So you open a summer camp in Israel, and you fly people in, and you get the kids there, and you start teaching them that there's a lot of anti-Semitism out there, and you have to protect yourself, because everybody's an anti-Semite, and they're going to get you. And the kid gets scared, and he's very impressionable. And then he goes back, and he becomes part of a frame, which is an organization that protects the synagogue. But you already got your hooks into him, and you're an intelligence agency. You want information. So when he gets a job that's good, you can get information. That's how everything suddenly is open to you. That's how suddenly this community is committed to you. And they don't even know it, because they don't know that once an operation goes bad, the Mossad guy picks up and leaves, and everybody else has stayed in the mud. I mean, Pollard is a very good example of that. He came into the Israeli embassy, and they kicked him out because of internal rivalries. And now he's sitting in jail. He thought he was a patriot. There is no such thing as dual loyalty. This is a myth. People say, well, you know, the Jewish community has a dual loyalty. That's wrong. Either you're loyal to your country or you're not. There is no duality in that. You cannot be loyal to two countries. Never will Israel agree to have an Israeli support the U.S. the way they expect people in the Jewish community to support Israel. There are more people in Israeli jails for supporting or helping U.S. intelligence than you have Israelis in American jails. Because any time there was a guy that was sat 15 years in Israeli prison, and nobody knew about him. He was a major in the Air Force, and he was arrested because he met with a secretary from the American embassy, and allegedly was intending to help the CIA. He didn't help the CIA. Nobody said he did. He intended. And 15 years later, they said that he's in jail. He was incommunicado. Nobody knew where he was. He disappeared. Today, the Israeli government is facing a brutal situation. Here's the irony. You have a Jewish community which is militant, and an Israeli government that wants peace. You have Israel saying, we don't want America to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And you have the Jewish community saying, we want it. And you have these guys on the Hill here saying, we want to. And you say, why? I mean, why is Dole and all these other guys, why do they want to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? The Israeli government said they don't want it. It's bad for peace. But the Israeli government doesn't vote in the U.S. The Israeli government doesn't give money to American politicians. So now there's a double war. There's one war that should be taken, you and your government, to tell them, hey, there's a hungry kid in New York. Feed him before you feed a hungry kid in Tel Aviv. No, actually, that's not true. Feed a hungry kid in New York before you pay the university tuition for a kid in Jerusalem. That's where the difference is. And the Israeli government is trying to have peace, and you have the American Congress saying, you can't trust these Palestinians. You can't give them an inch. Israel says, we want to give them. We want to give it back. We want to get peace. We don't want our guys dying, because people die when there's war. And it's Israelis that are dying, and that's Israelis that are being bombed. It's not the North American Jewish community that's bombed. They say, you guys get bombed. And when you talk about that, there's like a silence. You're like talking to a wall. When I talk, I had my second book. I had a record with my second book. I think my first book sold something around the world, close to 8 million copies. My second book was not reviewed in any newspaper in North America. Now that's a record. None. No, I'm sorry. I think the guy in the Phoenix Gazette, and the people from B'nai B'rith walked in and asked for him to resign. Yeah, because he's an anti-Semite. Now, I know what they do because I used to ask them to do it. I mean, when I was in the Mossad, and we had a guy that gave us problems in the U.S., and he was speaking out, and he was talking like Pete talked once and said, Israel is bombing Lebanon with cluster bombs. We say, hey, who's that guy? You know? Pete Makaki, we used to call him. Yeah, which is Pete the cockroach. Because he makes a lot of noise and you can't get rid of him. So what you do is you get in touch with a guy in the station in New York or in the station in Washington. You say, tell the guys at B'nai B'rith to label him. And of course the campaign starts, and before you know it, the guy's labeled. And he's an anti-Semite. Because that's what we say he is. And that's one stain you cannot wash. Now, it shames me as a Jew to tell you that. But that's the fact. And it's wrong. And the people who are perpetrating this don't really understand what they're doing, because they're losing their own liberties. Now, I realize at last why they don't care. You have these same communities that will say, well, the Mossad has to do it, and they don't really care. On the other hand, any peeps that you have from your intelligence agency, the CIA, which I think is one of the best in the world, if not the best in the world, and has probably the best people in the world in it, any move they make, these same people will jump on them 10 times from Sunday. And you say, how can they do that? Why are they so hard? Well, I realize now why. They don't have to live with the Mossad. If they were in Israel, they would cry out against the Mossad, which people in Israel are doing. Just this week, just to give you an example of people saying there's a dual standard. I'll give you an example of a dual standard. I read today on the plane on the way here, Time magazine, there was an article about this guy that was brought in from Argentina or something, that he killed 400 and some Italians, murdered them, SS man. He said, I was ordered to do it, so I did it. I think he should stand trial for that. I think so. I believe somebody does that. This is, in every army there's an order that says, illegal order you don't fulfill. And if you're a soldier and you're given an order to murder, you don't murder, because you're a soldier. And you're willing to die, but you're not willing to break that kind of a law. This is 50 years old. 2 weeks ago in Israel, an officer admitted that he massacred 43 Egyptian prisoners of war in the '56 war. And others admitted to the total of close to 1,000 Egyptian civilians and soldiers that were killed in '67. Now, everybody knows that in Israel, but nobody's actually come out and admitted it. These guys have admitted it. What has the government of Israel said? Well, it's a very saddening thing to hear, but too long has passed for us to actually be able to put them on trial. Now that's a double standard. And I think that shows that your press is worthless. And I think that your government is not far behind. And I'll tell you why. If this would have happened in Tanzania, that you'd had the North Tanzanians kill 1,000 South Tanzanians, you would have stopped aid. You would have had people saying in Congress, how can we send money to these people? They're murderers. First, let's put them on trial. 1,000 people. Most of them actually were Sudanese workers that were working on highways in the Sinai. They weren't even soldiers. And you know what the reason was that they killed them? We had nobody to guard them. And we couldn't take them with us. Wasn't that in the Battle of the Bulge? You Americans never forget what the Germans did in the Battle of the Bulge when they took the prisoners, because they couldn't take prisoners, I mean. And they killed them. And you'll remember Melamine for that forever. And nobody dares. You know what? Even the Egyptian government is not daring to say anything because they're afraid that you Americans will stop aid to them for complaining. Now, by not talking about it, what you have done is you've said, okay, you guys, you can do whatever you want. I'll give you an interesting story. You have a thing called free trade. I'm not for free trade because, you know, I don't think I'm going to find a job in Mexico, and I'm Canadian. But that's aside the point. There's a free trade that you have with Israel. Did you know that? That's the first free trade you ever had with Israel. You give, well, that's another free trade. You give everything free to Israel, and Israel gives you nothing back. But there is an actual agreement, a free trade agreement with Israel. And I remember, as a member of the Mossad, how we used to play with that. We used to go to companies in Europe and say, we need from you this and this and this as far as arms are concerned, whether it be Bofors or some, you know, whatever, engine manufacturer or whatever, or electronics. We say, but we've got a deal for you. And they'd say, what's the deal? You want to sell stuff to the States with no barriers? They'd say, sure. You say, okay, you bring your stuff to Israel, we'll package it, and we'll send it to the States. You see, we got free trade. So suddenly you got half of Europe trading through. Israel manufactures more things that Israelis never heard of. I mean, if it was up to what Israel can do, we'd still be selling vegetables and sand. No, but there's a lot of stuff that comes from Europe, is funneled through Israel to the United States. Free trade. So now the Europeans say, like a European television manufacturer, let's say Blaupunkt, just an example. They can say, hey, we don't need free trade. We can sell it. You know, we send the televisions through Tel Aviv. They box it, good in cardboard, and they ship it to the U.S., and voila, free trade, one way. Because you see, you can't sell free trade back to Germany because you don't have a deal. Unless you're willing to do it backwards through Israel. And I'm sure that a few companies are doing that. It sounds funny, but it's very sad. It's very sad when you lose deals. For example, the Saudi deal. There was a time when the Saudis wanted to buy tanks, you know, extra fuel tanks for their jets. And, of course, our lobby said, no way. I mean, that will allow the Saudi planes to make it all the way to Israel. You can't do that. You're giving them the power over us. Of course, nobody knew that we had a deal through a manufacturer, an Israeli manufacturer, through a company in Europe, that we were selling the Saudis those tanks. We didn't want you guys to do it. So we got the lobby to stop you guys, and we made a bundle on it. And this goes on and on. Now, the difference between that kind of an intelligence agency and what you have is the Mossad is not accountable to anybody except the Mossad. And they don't give a damn about the Israeli government because the Israeli government is temporary. See, they look at politicians and say, well, they're here today, they're gone tomorrow. What do they know? We know what's good for the country. We've brought it up to here. If we make peace tomorrow, they'll put us apart, they'll close us down, they'll take away the military, and then the enemies will come and attack us, which a lot of them believe. But that doesn't give a chance to peace. And you know what the problem is with not having peace? The Arabs have lost every war against Israel. But it's like playing against a very good chess player. I mean, eventually you learn the game. And there are not many more wars that Israel can win again and again, because Israel cannot lose a war. It has only one war to lose, and that's the end of it. And it's happened before, 3 times in our history, that we ended up being kicked out of the land because of zealots. The guys who kept bringing back war were zealots in our history. We have that, and it's happening now. Now, I know a lot of people get intimidated because they're afraid that they'll be labeled anti-Semite, anti-Israeli, but my plea is to people, I say, if you're a good American and you care about America, first of all, make sure that things are right in your backyard. Make sure that the stuff that's going on in your backyard you can swallow. Never do anything, as far as I'm concerned. There's a mistake. I hear a lot of people say, there is a problem in the United States. There's a problem with those groups and that group, and those people are bad, and those people are bad. You make one big mistake. You don't say, we. We have a problem. If you're pro-abortion or anti-abortion, don't say, they are for abortion, we are fighting them. No, no, no. Say, we have a problem. And once you start saying that, there's a story in the Jewish, in the Passover story, there's a story about 4 sons. That's 4, not Mossad like. There's the good son, which is the smart son, the stupid son, the one who doesn't know how to ask, and the bad son. Now, the stupid son is just stupid, so his questions are stupid. The one who doesn't know how to ask doesn't ask. The smart son says, when we left Egypt, God did this to us, and we suffered, and we went through the desert, and we went through the desert for 40 years, and we got this, and we got that. And the bad son says, when they got out of the desert, they got this, and they got that, and they got that. So if you want to be a good American, say we. Because you're a democracy, your laws are yours, whether you like them or not. And you're the reason they're not changing, because you're not convincing enough other people. And because your media says, well, we don't have an agenda. And we believe them. Now, the same way if you like the United States, don't be afraid to speak up when you like Israel. Because there is what to like. I miss Israel very much. I grew up there. I miss the smell. I miss my friends. I miss a lot of things about it. But you have to say something if you want to save it. I mean, if your kid is on drugs and you're going to do something to stop him. You're not going to say, well, he won't like me if I tell him. So you tell him, and you tell him. And if your media doesn't do it, then say it again, and ask them, and write letters, and ask about it. And make sure that when you write the questions, you understand them. And make sure that they understand them. And make sure that they understand them. You're not going to go away. And then you'll be able to change things. Now, where was I? If anybody has any questions. Yes, sir.
Parent or what? How would it?
I'll answer it very simple. The Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith. Most people that are members of B'nai B'rith are good people. Most people that work for B'nai B'rith believe and work for a good cause. But that's like saying that a submachine gun is a good weapon. It is. Depends where you aim it. Now, they have given up, their leadership has given up the will to decide whether what they do or don't do is right or wrong. They have passed that on to somebody else to decide. And they're just targeted. So most of their membership, most of the people in those organizations are good people that are working for a good cause, and they do a lot of good things. But there are elements that are targeted. So how can we separate? Is the butt of the gun part of the problem or just the barrel? I mean, which is which? Of course, without the butt, you can still use the rifle, but it's part and parcel. It's one thing. I think the people who hear about it and don't want to do anything about it and know that it's true are to blame.
You speak
about the dual standards of the Mossad. I'd like to know if you'd be just as happy to see the Israeli officials prosecuted for the war crimes against the Palestinian people as the Hitler people were persecuted for the demise of the Jewish people.
First of all, in the example that I gave, I was very specific to that particular point because we talked about a soldier killing prisoners, and that was the two cases. Never in the history of the state of Israel have there been gas chambers, mass executions. Not mass executions. There were killings that are unexcusable. We can compare that to other wars and situations that have happened. I don't think that is a particularly exact thing. Now, just so you understand, today in Israel, the right wing is asking for trials against the government of Israel for peace crimes. No, this is not funny. This is what they're asking for. They're saying that Rabin is a traitor, he's giving up land, and therefore there should be peace trials once he's out of office. There is no excuse for anything. By the way, the Palestinians are victims of the Holocaust. Because you must also understand that the Israelis that are perpetrating the terrible things against the Palestinians are not victims. They are not the victims who are now perpetrating it. Yes? I saw a hand here. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
I would like to ask you, what's the difference between like Mossad and the ADL? Or if there's any relationship between the two, or is there not?
The Anti-Defamation League is, Mossad is an intelligence agency of the State of Israel, a foreign intelligence, the Israeli CIA. If you were to compare it, it would be like, what is the Moon Church for the Korean CIA? It's a vehicle, it's a tool. The Mossad will not stop to exist without the ADL. The ADL doesn't do the job for the Mossad. It does specific jobs. It will gather information when asked for. It will do all kinds of things, but it's not an integral part of the intelligence agency. Yes, sir.
Are you a full Canadian, or are you also an Israeli? Are you dual citizenship?
Yeah, I'm a Canadian. But I'm also an Israeli. I have dual citizenship.
Where do your children go to school?
Okay. I was born in Canada. I'll answer that. I was born in Canada, in Edmonton, Alberta. I grew up in Israel because my mother was born in Jerusalem. And my father was born in Canada. And he came to Israel to fight in 48. And I was born in 49. He really fought hard. But the thing is, I grew up in Israel. When I was in Israel, my children went to school in Israel. They were Israelis. One daughter was born in Canada. Just to give you a background on myself, I served in the Israeli army for 3 years. Then, after that, I left Israel for a while. I came back. I rejoined the Navy. I finished in the rank of lieutenant commander in the Israeli Navy. I was then recruited to the Mossad. I reached the rank of colonel in the Mossad, and that's when I left. Had I had the choice today, knowing what I have given up and realizing what I have achieved, I probably wouldn't have done it. Because I've really achieved not much. The Mossad is still there. They're still doing the same thing. Nobody cares. The media doesn't care. The Americans don't care. The Germans don't care. The French don't care. Some Israelis care. I've lost my country, which is Israel. Also Canada, but you can't take Israel out of me. So I've lost that. I've lost all my friends. Well, I still keep, in contact with them. My family has lost their connection. So no, so if you're asking me, where they have grown up. They've grown up in Israel. If I had a choice, I would have not heard of Mossad.
You dual wireless?
I beg your pardon?
Dual wireless?
No, I'm a Canadian. No, I'm a Canadian. Let me explain that. When I was in Israel, if there was a subject that would have been in any way, not to my opinion, but to Canadian opinion, counter to Canada, I would not have done it or not participated. As a Canadian, I will not take arms against Israel unless Israel attacks Canada. Not very likely, but in that event, I will. Because that is my country of birth, that's my country. So I don't have any, Now, just to tell that, when I was in the Mossad, somebody asked me in the Mossad, where are you from? With your English. I said, well, I'm Canadian. And the guy said, no, where are you really from? I said, I'm Canadian. He says, come on, we've all been Canadian so many times. Where are you really from? Yes?
Are you still in danger as you claimed in your book?
Well, I don't claim anything. I mean, let's put it this way. People in Israel have sworn to kill me. In the media. A guy came on Canadian. Here's the media. You want to hear about the media? They asked me to come on a show on Canada AM. National Canadian show. It's like Good Morning America or something, but in Canada. Speak Canadian. I come on the show. This is for the publication of my book, The Other Side of Deception. They bring a guy from Israel who is a newspaper man who wrote in an Israeli newspaper that I should be killed. So they bring him on the show in Canada. And they ask him, why did you say that? He says, because I mean it. And they said, what do you mean you mean it? He said, well, what he has done is the most atrocious thing any Jew can do. And since the Mossad cannot get him in Canada, because that might spoil a relationship between Canada and Israel, we are hopeful that there will be a decent Jew in Canada who will do the job for us. Now, first of all, that explains that I'm alive and there's probably not a decent Jew in Canada. But the question to that is, did you hear about it? Did you hear about it?
I heard about it. I also, obviously I've read an awful lot about it.
No, about this particular case? Did you hear about that? No. Assume, now take the other side. There's a guy by the name of Rushdie who wrote a book a fictional book, in which he says something about Allah. And the Muslim community, or not even the Muslim community, the Ayatollahs wanted to kill him. Look at the uproar. But you see, that fits in with what Mossad does and the others, because that's a Muslim problem. But here, but you know what people said to me? Well, maybe you deserve it. So that answers your question, how do I feel today?
Temple? Or do the people look at you?
No, let me explain to you something. I'm from Israel. I'm an Israeli. I'm Jewish by birth. I'm proud to be Jewish. I would never be anything but Jewish. I've never been to a synagogue. Most Israelis don't go to synagogue. 70 or 80% of Israelis are not religious. The guys you see on television beating up Arabs, those are Jews from Brooklyn. No, really. They come from Brooklyn to Israel, and they settle in the West Bank. The Israelis don't like them. They're causing a lot of trouble. Look at it. Every time they come with a microphone to one of them, they speak New York English. Yes, sir.
Could you tell me a little about the Shin Bet? Is there a connection with the Mossad? And,
No connection.
No connection. Do they act in the same way toward?
No. Shin Bet is the Israeli Internal Security. Shirutei Bitachon. That's a general name. Now it's called Shabak. What they do, they're like the FBI. But they have rules and regulations. You see, they exist legally in the state of Israel. When they go out to arrest somebody, they have to bring a policeman with them to do the arrest, because they have no arresting powers. They do it, and they say they had a policeman. They're foremen, They're the kind of foreman guys. But they're totally different. It's totally two different things. Yes, sir.
I appreciate the word you use on your book about deception, because I spent 9 years, as I told you this morning, supporting the clandestine activities of CIA in the Pentagon. And every year, right across the hall from me, is the Office of Deception. And every time we ran an operation, they deceived everybody they could. And you're the first person I've seen apply that word the way it really means in the business. You know.
Let me explain to you where my name for the book came. The Mossad has a slogan, which is the anthem of the Mossad, if you want to call it. It's a biblical term. And it says, by way of deception, thou shalt do war. And that's what's on the logo of the Mossad, which, by the way, the only place it's ever been seen is on the internet on my homepage. Yes, ma'am.
Are you a Talmudist, a believer in the Talmud?
I'm a non-practicing Jew.
What does that mean?
That means I'm like a Protestant to Catholicism. I mean,
Have you been emancipated from the synagogue and the belief in the Talmud?
no, I grew up in a family which was not religious. I mean, we believe in the history of our people. I practice what the Bible preaches, but not in the synagogue. The Bible says, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not kill.
But that's not the Talmud.
No, but what the Talmud is the explanation of what the Bible means.
Well, it's a reversal.
No, it's not a reversal.
Oh, yes, it is. It's a interpretation.
Let me tell you something. Have you read the Talmud?
Yes.
What part of it? How about Baba Batra? Now, in Baba Batra, we're talking about what a parcel of land and how it should be divided. And they're saying whoever has it, and we're talking about the fencing and how the fences are used, and if the fence goes through the middle, whose land it belongs to, and how, if you want to put a shade on your side of the fence, and your neighbor built the fence, can you build the shade without paying him for his part of the fence? That's the Talmud. The Talmud is the law of the Bible. That is the interpretation of the Bible into law, into everyday law.
You admitted the basic premise that that all non-Jews have no property rights.
No, that doesn't say that. Doesn't say.
Yes.
Again, I disagree with you with that because it says like this.
I wish I had brought my.
No, excuse me, but there's a
copy.
basic property in the Talmud which says not only do they not have no rights, but you have no right to infringe on their rights because the land that they're in. Now, the question is this: are you a citizen of the state or not? Well, this is getting religious. Too much for me.
Religion, as I understand it, it's just religionized law.
I disagree with you, and the Mossad disagrees with you, but you should be and the management, no, but you're entitled. I mean.
Might take one more question.
Okay, one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Then we should really ask, it has been asked before, of course, is Jewishness, if it is not exactly a religion, is it a nation? Is it a cultural tradition? Is it a common history, or is it a race?
I'll answer that.
Do.
Is Judaism a race, a common history, a religion, a culture? Judaism is, I'll tell you, Judaism is, first of all, a religion. Then it becomes a nation. As far as race, there's a problem with that. I'll tell you why. Because most of the non-Sephardic Jews are descendants of a nation called the Khazari, or the Khazarian. So we are Jews. We believe that Moses took us out of Egypt. We're proud of being Jews. A lot of us don't fulfill all what we're supposed to, which most other religions don't. And we should. But that's all I can tell you. Now, no. In Israel, it's a nation.
A nation.
In Israel, it's a nation. Now, but that moves away from intelligence. Not that it's not intelligent to be religion, but in this particular thing, I'm not really. Yeah, but that's not my subject.
Is your wife happy with you?
No.
Thank you, sir.